There's nothing more we can do. Dr. Alastair Finch's voice cut through the tense operating room, cold as the steel scalpel he tossed onto the tray. The heart monitor's steady, ominous drone seemed to seal the patient's fate. The surgical team deflated, their shoulders slumping in defeat. In the corner, almost invisible, stood Anna, the rookie nurse they all ignored. The head nurse shot her a look of pity mixed with contempt, as if her silence was proof of her uselessness. But Anna wasn't silent out of fear. Her eyes were locked on the myriad of monitors, seeing not just lines and numbers, but a pattern, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper of life everyone else had missed. While the godlike surgeon declared defeat, this forgotten nurse was about to prove him wrong. Leaning forward, she whispered to no one in particular, her voice barely audible but shaking with discovery, "I see it." And in that moment, the impossible was about to happen. The whisper hung in the air for a fraction of a second, a fragile thing in a room built of steel, glass, and suffocating pressure. The drone of the flatlining heart monitor was the only sound, a monotonous funeral dirge for Mr. Harrison, the city councilman whose life was now measured in fading beeps. Operating Room 1 at St. Jude's was a theater of miracles, but tonight, the final curtain had fallen. Dr. Alastair Finch, a man whose hands were insured for a sum that could purchase a small island, had just delivered the eulogy. He was already stripping off his gloves with a practiced, almost violent efficiency, his face a mask of weary disgust. Failure was a stain, and he was eager to scrub it off. Then, Anna's words, "I see it," finally registered. Dr. Finch froze. He didn't turn around. He didn't even grant her the dignity of his gaze. He simply addressed the room, his voice dripping with a venomous calm. "What was that?" Brenda, the head surgical nurse, reacted as if a sterile instrument had been dropped into a mud puddle. Her face, already stern, hardened into a granite slab. She spun around, her eyes zeroing in on Anna, who seemed to shrink under the weight of the collective glare. "Nurse," Brenda hissed, her voice low and dangerous as she marched toward Anna's corner. "Be silent. Now is not the time for hysterics." Dr. Evans, the surgical resident, let out a short, sharp laugh devoid of humor. He was polishing his glasses on his scrubs, a nervous habit he adopted whenever trying to impress Finch. "Perhaps she's having a spiritual vision, doctor," he quipped, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Seeing the light for him." A noble sentiment, but a few minutes too late. The comment, though grim, broke the tension for some. A junior anesthesiologist stifled a cough that sounded suspiciously like a chuckle. The room had found a new target for its frustration, a scapegoat for the collective failure, the quiet, plain-faced rookie nurse in the corner. "I asked a question," Finch said, finally turning. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, were piercing. He looked not at Anna, but at Brenda, as if Anna were an object to be managed. "What did your nurse say?" Brenda was now standing directly in front of Anna, blocking her from view, a human shield of hierarchy. "She said nothing, doctor. She's overwrought. It's her first major loss." "No," Anna's voice was stronger this time, though it still trembled. She took a half step out from behind Brenda's formidable frame, forcing herself into the light. "I said I see it." Finch raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. He walked slowly toward her, his surgical clogs making soft, menacing sounds on the polished floor. The entire team watched, frozen, as the lion approached the lamb. "Enlighten us, nurse." He paused, pretending to have forgotten her name, a classic power move. "Anna," she supplied quietly. "Nurse Anna." In this room, where state-of-the-art technology and a decade of my own peer-reviewed research have confirmed that this man's heart has failed, what is it, precisely, that you see? The condescension was a physical force, pressing down on her. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment she had dreaded her entire, short career. The moment her unique perception would be exposed to the cold, harsh light of scientific scrutiny and inevitable ridicule. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "It's in the telemetry feed. The secondary processor." Finch glanced at the massive wall of monitors, his expression one of profound boredom. The secondary processor is a redundant system. It shows the same data. A flat line. No, it doesn't, Anna insisted, her voice gaining a sliver of conviction. She pointed a shaking finger toward a small, seemingly insignificant graph in the bottom right corner of the main screen. The line isn't flat. It looks flat. But there's a pattern in the electrical noise. A microrhythm. It's a pale yellow, instead of the usual gray static. Silence. Dr. Evans was the first to break it, unable to contain his disbelief. Pale yellow? Nurse, are you feeling all right? Did you get enough sleep? Brenda looked mortified. She grabbed Anna's arm, her fingers digging in like talons. That's enough. You're coming with me. Doctor, I am so sorry, she's clearly not well. But Finch held up a hand, a gesture that stopped Brenda in her tracks. A strange, predatory curiosity had replaced his anger. He was a cat playing with a mouse, drawing out the humiliation for sport. Wait, he commanded. Let her finish. Pale yellow, you say? Fascinating. And what does this pale yellow pattern signify, in your expert medical opinion? Anna's mind raced. How could she explain it? How could she put into words a lifetime of seeing the world in a way no one else did? It means the sinoatrial node isn't dead, she blurted out. It's trapped. There's a feedback loop from the pacer wire we installed. It's canceling out the node signal on the primary ECG, but the raw data on the secondary feed shows its ghost. It's still firing. Faintly. But it's there. Finch stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he turned to the rest of the team. What we have here, he announced, his voice booming with theatrical gravity, is a medical diagnosis based on a color palette. A diagnosis that contradicts every single piece of empirical data we have. We are no longer in a hospital, we have stumbled into an art class. The room erupted in a wave of strained, sycophantic laughter. Evans laughed the loudest, shaking his head in mock disbelief. Brenda's face was beet red with shame. She tugged on Anna's arm again, harder this time. You are relieved of your duties. Leave this or immediately. Anna felt a tear of pure frustration and shame slide down her cheek. They were laughing at her. The brilliant, infallible Dr. Finch was using her as the punchline to a joke while a man's last chance at life faded away on the screen in a symphony of pale yellow that only she could see. Her talent had never felt more like a curse. She had spoken up. She had tried. And she had failed, not just the patient, but herself. Her head hung in defeat as Brenda began to forcefully steer her toward the operating room doors, her career at St. Jude's apparently over before it had even truly begun. Just as the heavy doors began to swing shut on her career, something inside Anna snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, seismic shift. The shame and fear were still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but underneath it, a fierce, protective certainty blazed to life. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about the man on the table and the pale yellow light that only she could see. She wrenched her arm free from Brenda's grip with a surprising surge of strength. The motion was so abrupt that Brenda stumbled back a step, her face a mask of pure shock. No, Anna said, her voice clear and ringing in the suddenly silent room. She planted her feet, grabbing the edge of a stainless steel instrument cart to steady herself. You're not listening. Dr. Finch, who had already turned his back to her and was speaking to a technician, slowly pivoted back around. His face was no longer amused or mocking. It was a thundercloud of pure rage. You are defying a direct order, nurse. You are endangering this sterile environment with your outburst. You have 5 seconds to leave this room before I have security drag you out. It's not an outburst, it's a diagnosis. Anna's voice rose, filled with a desperate urgency. She knew she sounded unhinged, but she had to try to speak their language. She pushed the image of colors from her mind and forced herself to translate. Think of it like aliasing. A signal processing error. The pacemaker's electrical field is operating at a frequency that's creating a digital ghost on the primary ECG monitor. It's a phantom signal that's perfectly masking the heart's true output. It's a one-in-a-million technological glitch. You have to bypass the main software filter. Look at the raw, unadulterated waveform data coming directly from the catheter tip. Her technical explanation, born from hours of obsessive late-night reading of medical tech manuals, hung in the air. For a moment, she saw a flicker of doubt in the eyes of the junior anesthesiologist. Her logic was, at the very least, plausible. But Finch extinguished that flicker with a single, contemptuous laugh. He strode toward her until he was inches from her face, his voice dropping to a low, menacing snarl. Aliasing? Raw waveform data? Did you get your nursing degree from MIT, or did you simply watch a science fiction movie last night? He leaned in closer, his voice for her ears only. You are having a psychotic break in my operating room. You are a danger to my patient, my team, and yourself. He straightened up, addressing the entire room again, his voice resonating with absolute authority. Let this be a lesson to all of you. This is what happens when we lower our standards. This is the result of letting emotional instability into a place that demands absolute precision. He pointed a damning finger at Anna. Nurse Anna, consider your employment at this hospital terminated. Brenda, call security. Have her escorted from the premises. I want a full incident report on my desk by morning. Brenda nodded grimly, reaching for the wall-mounted intercom. Dr. Evans looked on with a smug, satisfied expression. This was the end. Anna had fought, and she had lost everything. The tears she had held back now welled in her eyes, blurring the sight of the monitors, blurring the pale yellow signal into a smear of hopeless light. But as Brenda's finger hovered over the button to call security, Finch said one word, stop. A cruel, brilliant idea was dawning on his face. He looked at Anna's tear-streaked, defiant face, and he saw an opportunity. It wasn't enough to fire her. It wasn't enough to ruin her reputation. He needed to utterly, scientifically, and publicly annihilate her, to grind her last shred of credibility into dust. You want to chase ghosts in the machine, nurse? He asked, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. Fine. He walked over to the central command console, the nerve center of the entire operating room. He gestured dramatically toward the main screen. I will give you exactly 60 seconds. He tapped the large digital clock on the wall. Starting now. You will stand right where you are, and you will direct me. You will tell my hands what to do on this console. You will show me, not with your feelings, not with imaginary colors, but with quantifiable, empirical, medical proof, this phantom heartbeat of yours. The room held its breath. And when you fail, he continued, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, and make no mistake, you will fail, you will not only be fired. I will personally submit a recommendation to the board that your nursing license be permanently revoked for gross incompetence and endangering a patient. Do you understand me? He didn't wait for an answer. He turned to Dr. Evans. Start the timer. And be ready to record the official time of death. The challenge was absolute. The stakes were impossible. 60 seconds to prove a miracle or be erased from her profession forever, all while the man who held her future in his hands willed her to fail. The clock on the wall began its silent, merciless countdown. 59. 58. 57. Before we see if Anna can pull off the impossible, let's pause for a second. Right now, a woman's entire future hangs in the balance, all because she dared to see something everyone else missed. Her voice was ignored, her talent was mocked, and now she has 60 seconds to prove them all wrong. If you believe that the quietest voices often have the most important things to say, and if you root for every person who has ever been underestimated, then take a moment to hit that subscribe button. By joining this community, you're supporting stories about the hidden heroes among us. Okay, the clock is ticking. Let's see what happens. The clock was a tyrant. 56. 55. 54. Each second fell like a hammer blow in the silent operating room. Dr. Finch stood by the console, arms crossed, the very picture of condescending authority. Dr. Evans held his pen ready to record the time of death, a smug half-smile on his face. Brenda stared at Anna, her expression a mixture of anger and pity. For them, this was not a medical procedure, it was an execution of a career, and they were the willing firing squad. For a heartbeat, Anna's mind was a storm of panic. The faces, the clock, the weight of a man's life, it threatened to swallow her. Then she looked at the monitors. She ignored the flat, lying line of the primary ECG and focused on the faint, pale yellow glow she saw in the raw data stream. It was her truth. The storm in her mind ceased, replaced by an ocean of calm, crystalline focus. The world fell away. There was only the pattern, the clock, and the work to be done. Dr. Finch, Anna's voice cut through the silence. It wasn't the timid whisper of before. It was sharp, clear, and resonant with an authority no one in the room had ever heard from her. Access the machine's diagnostic panel. Authorization code, 97 Delta. Finch blinked, momentarily stunned by her tone. A flicker of surprise crossed his face before the mask of arrogance slammed back down. He huffed a small, disbelieving laugh but turned to the console. He was a man indulging a child's tantrum before bedtime. His fingers moved with theatrical slowness, typing in the code. A complex series of options appeared on the screen, a menu rarely used by surgeons. Bypass the primary signal aggregator, Anna commanded, her eyes never leaving the screen. Now, isolate the raw electrical input from the atrial lead. I need the uncompressed waveform. There is no waveform, nurse, Finch grunted, his fingers flying across the keypad, executing her commands with a dismissive speed meant to show how pointless this was. It is a dead lead. On the screen, the flat line vanished, replaced by a chaotic, jagged scribble of what looked like pure static. A meaningless blizzard of electronic noise. Evans snorted. Incredible. You found television static from the 1980s. Congratulations. Anna ignored him completely. That is not noise, she stated, her voice unwavering. Magnify the y-axis by a factor of 200. Now, disable the onboard noise cancellation algorithm, Model 7. Up in the glass-walled observation gallery, a white-haired man in a tweed jacket, who had been sitting quietly in the back, suddenly stood up. Dr. Eris Thorne, a semi-retired biomedical engineer and one of the lead designers of the very cardiac system they were using, leaned against the glass, his eyes wide. He grabbed the arm of the hospital administrator sitting beside him. Did you hear that? Thorne whispered, his voice tight with disbelief. She told him to disable the noise cancellation by model number. Not even the senior technicians know those codes. Who is that woman? Down below, Finch's fingers paused over the console. He shot a sharp, questioning look at Anna. Disabling the noise cancellation was a deeply counterintuitive step, like trying to find a whisper in a hurricane by turning the wind up. But his ego wouldn't let him stop now. He had to see this farce to its conclusion. He hit the command. The static on the screen grew wilder, more chaotic. 35 seconds, Evans announced, his voice laced with mock solemnity. Apply a fast Fourier transform to the data stream, Anna said, her next command coming so quickly it was clear she was steps ahead of them all. Set the frequency filter to a range of 55 to 65 Hz. This time, Evans' smirk completely vanished. A Fourier transform was a complex mathematical function used to break a signal down into its constituent frequencies. It was the language of engineers and physicists, not nurses. He looked from Anna to the screen and then to Dr. Finch, a seed of doubt finally sprouting in his overconfident mind. Finch's face was now a stony mask. The game was over. This was no longer a hysterical rookie, this was something else entirely. His pride, however, was a fortress. He executed the command. For a few seconds, the screen flickered as the machine's powerful processor performed the complex calculation. The blizzard of noise began to shift, to coalesce. The random, jagged lines started to align, pulled into order by the force of the algorithm. And then, it appeared. At first, it was almost invisible. A tiny, ethereal pulse in the midst of the chaos. But it was there. A faint, but perfectly regular, perfectly rhythmic spike. A clear, unmistakable, biological signal. A collective gasp went through the room. The junior anesthesiologist's hand flew to his mouth. "My God," Dr. Evans breathed, his voice a choked whisper. That's a P-wave. A sinus rhythm." Brenda stared, her face ashen. The pen fell from Dr. Evans' numb fingers and clattered onto the floor. Dr. Finch took an involuntary step back from the console, his eyes locked on the tiny, miraculous spike. It was a ghost. A ghost that defied all his knowledge, all his experience, all his infallible certainty. The ghost was real. On the screen, the tiny spike pulsed with the steady, stubborn rhythm of life. The wall clock showed 18 seconds remaining. Anna let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her voice was quiet now, devoid of the sharp edge of command, but it filled the entire room. "There's your ghost, Doctor. Now, are you going to save this man's life?" For 3 eternal seconds, the operating room remained frozen in time. The only movement was the steady, miraculous pulse of the P-wave on the monitor and the relentless countdown of the clock. Dr. Finch stared at the screen, his face a canvas of disbelief. The foundations of his world, built on decades of unwavering certainty, had been shattered by a rookie nurse and a whisper of data. He was paralyzed, not by fear, but by the sheer, ego-crushing magnitude of his error. It was Brenda who broke the spell. The patient on the table was her lodestar, her only priority. Her loyalty wasn't to a man, but to the mission. The scorn on her face was instantly replaced by a fierce, protective focus. "Dr. Finch," she snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. "She's right. The patient is alive. What are your orders?" Finch didn't respond. He couldn't. His mind was a maelstrom of confusion and shame. The clock showed 12 seconds. Anna didn't wait. The time for deference was over. She stepped forward from the instrument cart, moving into the center of the room, into the light. Her voice was pure command. "We've been trying to restart a heart that never stopped. We need to reset the rhythm. Get me a high-dose epinephrine drip and charge the paddles to 200 joules. Now." The team, conditioned to respond to authority, jolted into action. A junior nurse scrambled for the epinephrine. Dr. Evans, his face pale and sweaty, fumbled to adjust the defibrillator. "Your hands are shaking, Dr. Evans," Anna said, her tone not cruel, but factual. "Brenda, take over the defibrillator. Evans, get the portable ultrasound. I need a look at the pericardium, stat. I think the pacer lead caused a microperforation. It's the only explanation for the signal blockage." Brenda didn't hesitate. She shoved Evans aside, her movements swift and sure as she began charging the paddles. Evans, humbled and wide-eyed, scrambled to retrieve the ultrasound machine, his earlier arrogance replaced by a frantic desire to obey. The entire hierarchy of the room had been inverted in less than a minute. The rookie nurse was the general, and the veterans were her soldiers. Dr. Finch watched the scene unfold, a whirlwind of activity he had not orchestrated. He saw his team, responding to Anna's every command with perfect, unquestioning efficiency. He saw the epinephrine being administered, the ultrasound being wheeled in, the paddles whining as they charged. And in that moment, something deeper than his ego took over, the core oath of his profession. He was a surgeon. There was a life to save. He strode forward, snatching the charged paddles from Brenda's hands. "Clear," he roared, his voice returning, but stripped of its arrogance. It was the raw, focused bark of a doctor at war. He pressed the paddles to the patient's chest. The body jolted. Every eye snapped to the monitor. Up in the gallery, the hospital administrator, a man named Davenport, turned to Dr. Thorne, his face a mask of utter confusion. "What is happening? How could she possibly know any of that? A microperforation? That's impossible to detect." Dr. Thorne's eyes were gleaming with an almost religious awe. "It is impossible," he whispered, never taking his eyes off Anna. A complication like that, a feedback loop from a tiny pericardial bleed, it wouldn't show up on an MRI, a CT, nothing. It's a ghost. A phantom in the machine's most complex systems. Most of the world's top cardiologists could study that data for a year and never find what she found in 60 seconds. But how? Davenport asked, bewildered. She has perfect diagnostic pitch, Thorne explained, his voice filled with reverence. It's a term I just invented because I've never seen it before. It's like a master musician hearing a single violin string that is 1,000th of a cent out of tune in a 100-piece orchestra. She doesn't just read the data. She feels its harmony. And she knew, instinctively, how to make it sing again. We are not watching a nurse, Mr. Davenport. We are watching a prodigy. The kind of genius that appears once in a generation. Back in the OR, the proof of that genius was undeniable. After the shock, the chaotic scribbles on the monitor began to resolve. The tiny P wave found its footing, followed by the sharp, beautiful spike of a QRS complex. A weak, but steady, sinus rhythm bloomed across the screen. The monotonous drone of the flatline was replaced by the gentle, rhythmic beep, beep, beep of a living, beating heart. The room erupted in a collective sigh of relief. A nurse in the corner began to cry silently. Dr. Evans stared at the steady rhythm on the ultrasound, confirming the bleed had begun to clot, his mouth agape. Anna watched the stable waveform for a long moment, then leaned back against the instrument cart, the adrenaline suddenly draining from her body, leaving her knees weak. Dr. Finch slowly lowered the paddles. He looked from the life-affirming pulse on the monitor to the patient's chest, and then, finally, his gaze fell upon Anna. His face, stripped of all its pride and authority, held an expression of profound, unadulterated awe. The battle was over. The patient was alive. And the quietest person in the room had been the only one who heard his heart still fighting. The steady, life-affirming beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. It was a rhythm of victory, a testament to the miracle they had all just witnessed. The surgical team stood in stunned silence, their adrenaline fading, replaced by a profound sense of awe. They were no longer looking at a rookie nurse, they were looking at the woman who had single-handedly pulled a man back from the brink of death. They saw a giant. But Anna didn't feel like a giant. As the wave of relief washed over her, she simply reverted to her training. She moved quietly to the patient's side, her eyes scanning the vitals, her hands expertly checking the four-drip. She wasn't basking in the glory, she was doing her job. This quiet humility, in the face of such a spectacular triumph, was more stunning to the onlookers than the feat itself. Dr. Evans stood by the ultrasound, staring at Anna, his mind struggling to reconcile the timid girl from 10 minutes ago with the brilliant commander who had saved them all. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it, realizing no words were adequate. Brenda, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly, began methodically organizing the instrument tray, unable to meet Anna's eyes. The shame was a palpable weight on her shoulders. Then, Dr. Finch moved. He stripped off his bloody gloves and walked slowly, deliberately, toward Anna. The team held its breath. This was the moment of reckoning. Finch stopped in front of her, and for a long, heavy moment, he said nothing. He simply looked at her, and in his eyes, his entire world of pride and arrogance was visibly crumbling to dust. "Nurse," he began, his voice hoarse. He cleared his throat. "Anna." Using her first name was a seismic concession. "What you did today, that procedure, it will never be in a textbook. What you saw, it cannot be taught in a lecture hall. It was," he struggled for the word, the admission costing him everything. "Miraculous." He took a deep breath, forcing himself to meet her calm, observant gaze. "I was wrong. My arrogance, my pride. I was blind. I nearly cost this man his life. You did not. You saved him." He paused, his next words a surrender. "And in doing so, you saved me from myself. I thank you." The apology, so raw and public, echoed in the silent room. Anna simply looked at him and offered a small, tired nod. We saved him, Doctor, she said softly, her voice devoid of any triumph or accusation. The team did. She shared the victory. She refused the crown. With that one simple sentence, she offered grace to the very people who had tried to humiliate her, and in doing so, she earned not just their respect, but their utter devotion. Before anyone could process the moment, the main doors to the OR hissed open. Mr. Davenport, the hospital administrator, and Dr. Eris Thorne strode in, having hastily scrubbed in. Their presence was a shocking breach of protocol, signaling the magnitude of the event. Davenport looked flustered, but Dr. Thorne had eyes for only one person. He walked directly past the famous surgeon-in-chief and stopped in front of Anna. "Miss," Thorne began, his voice booming with excitement, "I'm sorry, I don't know your last name." "It's just Anna," she replied quietly. "Anna," Thorne said, beaming as if he had just discovered a new star. "My name is Eris Thorne. I led the engineering team that designed the Series 8 diagnostic system you have there." He gestured to the monitors. "And I need to ask you, because I am completely mystified, where did you do your postdoctorate work in biosignal processing and quantum waveform analysis?" Anna blinked, confused by the question. "Sir? I didn't. I have a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. I just like to read the equipment manuals when I can't sleep." Dr. Thorne stared at her for a second, then threw his head back and let out a laugh so loud and joyous it seemed to shake the sterile room. "The manuals? My dear girl, people with 5 PhDs can't understand those manuals." He leaned in, his eyes twinkling with genius recognizing genius. "You don't just read, Anna. You understand. You have a gift that I have never seen before. A gift that this hospital, and frankly, the entire medical world, cannot afford to waste." Mr. Davenport stepped forward, his administrator's mind finally catching up to the situation. He saw the humbled legend, the awestruck team, and the quiet nurse who held all the power. "Nurse Anna," he said, his tone formal and drenched in respect. "When you are finished here, I would like to speak with you in my office. We have much to discuss." Anna simply nodded, her attention already drifting back to the patient on the table. She heard their words, she felt their stares, but all she truly saw was the steady, rhythmic pulse on the screen. The quiet beat that was the only validation she had ever needed. As the surgical team completed the closing procedures, a new kind of silence settled over operating room 1. It was not the tense, suffocating silence of before, but a quiet, contemplative reverence. The patient, Mr. Harrison, was stable, his heart beating a steady rhythm that was a monument to Anna's genius. As he was wheeled out towards the ICU, every member of the team paused to watch him go, their faces etched with a humility that hadn't been there 2 hours earlier. The power dynamic had been permanently rewired. The junior nurses, who once avoided Anna's quiet presence, now looked at her with wide-eyed adoration. One of them timidly approached and offered her a bottle of water, calling her ma'am. Dr. Evans, his face still pale, began quietly cleaning and organizing Anna's station, a menial task far beneath a surgical resident, but one he performed with the focused diligence of a penance. He was serving the new queen. Anna accepted it all with a gentle, weary grace. She offered the young nurse a kind smile and thanked her. She put a light hand on Dr. Evans's arm and said, "I can get that. You should go get some rest." She didn't gloat, she didn't lecture. She simply continued to be herself, a quiet island of calm in the emotional storm she had created. Her refusal to claim the spotlight only made her shine brighter. The true reckoning, however, was waiting in the hallway. Mr. Davenport and Dr. Thorne stood like twin statues of judgment. Dr. Finch was there, along with a shamed Brenda and a terrified Dr. Evans. Mr. Davenport's voice was cold fury, stripped of all corporate pleasantries. He looked directly at Finch. "Alastair, what transpired in that room was not a medical error. It was a catastrophic failure of leadership, ethics, and basic human decency, fueled by an ego so large it nearly suffocated a patient to death. You bullied a member of your staff and were prepared to falsify a time of death to cover your own fallibility. Finch, who had commanded rooms with his voice for 30 years, now stood mute, his head bowed. "You are on indefinite administrative leave, effective immediately," Davenport continued, his words like chips of ice. "A full peer review board will be convened, and I assure you, Dr. Thorne and I will be providing them with a detailed account of what we witnessed. You should contact your legal counsel." He then turned his glacial gaze on Brenda and Evans. "And you too. Your complicity and active participation in the harassment of a subordinate is a disgrace to this hospital's code of conduct. Consider this the only warning you will ever receive. From this moment on, your every action will be scrutinized. Any further report of unprofessionalism from any staff member will result in your immediate and permanent termination. Am I understood?" "Yes, sir," they mumbled in unison, their faces ashen. After a curt nod, Davenport dismissed them. They scurried away, their careers and reputations hanging by a thread. Then, he and Dr. Thorne turned to Anna as she stepped out of the OR. Davenport's expression softened completely. "Anna, on behalf of this hospital, I am offering you our most profound apology. We failed you. And we are going to make it right." He straightened his tie, getting into business mode. "We are creating a new position for you, effective today. Director of Diagnostic Analysis. You'll have your own lab, a dedicated research budget, and you'll report directly to me. Dr. Thorne has already agreed to act as your consultant. We will, of course, triple your current salary." Dr. Thorne stepped forward, his eyes gleaming. "Anna, a salary is meaningless. What you have is a gift. With the hospital's resources, we could revolutionize diagnostic medicine. We can build systems that think the way you do. We can save not one life, but thousands. You could be famous, wealthy, a Nobel laureate. It was the ultimate prize. Fame, fortune, and the power to change the world." They offered her a kingdom. Anna listened patiently, a small, tired smile on her face. "Thank you, Mr. Davenport. Dr. Thorne. That is incredibly generous." She paused, looking down the long, sterile corridor. "But I'm a nurse. I chose this job so I could be with patients. I like talking to them, making sure they're not scared. I like explaining things to their families." She looked back at the two most powerful men in the hospital, her gaze clear and certain. "I don't want a lab. I want to help people." She then asked a question that completely derailed their corporate and scientific ambitions, a question that showed them exactly who she was. "Excuse me, sirs, but may I go to the ICU waiting room? Mr. Harrison's family has been waiting for hours. Someone needs to tell them he's going to be okay." Before they could even formulate a response, Anna gave them a polite nod and began walking away. She left them standing there under the fluorescent lights, their grand offers dissolving in the air behind her. She didn't walk toward the executive suites or a future of fame. She walked toward a frightened family in a waiting room, her quiet footsteps echoing down the hall, a testament to a victory defined not by what she was offered, but by what she chose to be. 3 months later, the culture at St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital had undergone a quiet but seismic revolution. The legend of guardian angel Anna had spread through every ward, a cautionary tale for the arrogant and an inspiration for the overlooked. The change was most visible in the fates of those who had stood against her in Operating Room 1. Dr. Alastair Finch was not fired. His genius as a surgeon was too valuable to discard. Instead, he suffered a fate worse than termination for a man of his ego. He was humbled. The board stripped him of his title as Chief of Cardiovascular Surgery and removed him from all administrative duties. He was now just Dr. Finch, an attending surgeon who had to request or time like everyone else. The true punishment, however, was the change within him. He was often seen now pausing before a final call, looking to his nurses not for instruments, but for their opinions. He started listening. The god had been forced to become a man again, and in doing so, he slowly began the path to becoming a better doctor. Brenda's fall was less dramatic but just as profound. The incident was a permanent stain on her otherwise flawless record. She was demoted from head surgical nurse and reassigned to overseeing preoperative care. Her iron-fisted rule was over. In its place grew a quiet empathy. She was now the one who calmed nervous patients, the one who took young nurses aside to teach them, not with scorn, but with a newfound, weary patience. She was learning to heal people, not just manage procedures. Dr. Evans saw his promising career trajectory veer into a ditch. His informal fellowship with Finch was revoked, and he was reassigned to a grueling rotation in the emergency room to, as the official notice read, enhance his patient-centric communication skills. The crucible of the ER burned away his sycophantic arrogance, replacing it with the hard, unglamorous competence of a doctor on the front lines. He stopped trying to impress his superiors and started focusing on saving the lives in front of him. And Anna? Anna was not in a sterile, silent lab, poring over data. She was in the sun-drenched cardiac recovery ward, right where she wanted to be. She was laughing with Mr. Harrison, the man she had saved, who was now strong enough to beat his grandson at chess. When he saw her, his face lit up. "Here she is," he would say to his family. "My guardian angel." She had, in the end, accepted a new role, but one she had designed herself. She was now the hospital's first official patient advocate. Her job was to be the human bridge over the terrifying gap between medical science and the patient's experience. She translated complex jargon into simple terms, held the hands of frightened family members, and, most importantly, she listened. Armed with the full authority of the hospital board, she had the power to halt any procedure, to question any diagnosis, and to force any doctor, no matter how senior, to stop and explain themselves. She was the official voice for the voiceless. She still wore a simple uniform and her hair in a functional bun. Her voice was still soft. But now, when Anna spoke, everyone from the janitorial staff to the chief of medicine would stop, turn, and listen with the utmost respect. One afternoon, she saw a young nursing student, looking just as terrified as she once had, staring at a patient's chart with a worried frown. The student was hesitating, clearly afraid to question the attending doctor's orders. Anna walked over and stood beside her, her presence calm and reassuring. "What do you see?" she asked gently. "It's probably nothing," the student stammered. "But his potassium levels look a little off to me. I don't think he should be getting this medication." Anna looked at the chart, then back at the young woman's face. She saw the same fear, the same doubt, but also the same flicker of certainty she had felt in the OR. She gave the student a warm, knowing smile. "If you see something, you have to speak up," Anna said, her voice firm but kind. "Even if your voice shakes. It might be the only voice the patient has." She put a supportive hand on the student's shoulder. "Come on. Let's go talk to the doctor together." As they walked toward the nurses' station, Anna wasn't a world-famous researcher or a wealthy director. She was something far more important. She was a guardian, a mentor, and a quiet, unshakable promise that at St. Jude's, no one would ever be overlooked again. Anna's story is a powerful reminder that your worth is not determined by your title, and your strength isn't measured by how loudly you can speak. It's about having the courage to trust what you see when the world tells you you're wrong. The greatest heroes are often the quietest ones, the people who choose compassion over ambition and truth over pride. We want this channel to be a celebration of those quiet heroes. So, I'd love for you to share a piece of your story in the comments. Tell us about a time you were underestimated but proved everyone wrong, or a moment you saw someone else's quiet courage change everything. Let's fill this space with inspiration. By sharing our stories, we remind each other that we're not alone. If you believe in this mission and want to be part of our community, hit that follow button. Thank you for watching.